I'm Layla, I'm 34 years old, and my entire life, I've been told by my older sister that my career in tech wasn't real, right up until the moment our grandfather revealed my little company had been bought by the same corporation that owns hers. For $45 million. Dollars. That was the moment years of quiet condescension finally met a very loud, very public, and very satisfying conclusion. The rivalry, if you could call it that, wasn't a two-way street. It was more like a one-way boulevard of judgment, with my sister, Chloe, driving a metaphorical steamroller and me perpetually scrambling to get off the sidewalk. Chloe is 2 years older than me, and from the moment I was born, she seemed to have appointed herself the arbiter of my life's worth. She was the serious one, the academic, the one destined for greatness. I was the creative one, the dreamer, which in our family's unspoken language meant the one who would likely need financial help later in life. This dynamic was cemented early. She excelled in math and science. I filled sketchbooks with characters and fantastical worlds. When it came time for college, Chloe enrolled in a prestigious university's computer science program. It was a perfect fit, a logical extension of her personality, structured, precise, and universally respected. 2 years later, I followed her to the same university, but enrolled in the digital media and game design program. You would have thought I'd announced my intention to join a traveling circus. I'll never forget my college graduation party. It was a beautiful summer day in my parents' backyard. The air smelled of freshly cut grass and grilled hot dogs. I was floating, holding my diploma, a tangible symbol of 4 years of incredibly hard work, late nights spent coding, and endless hours of digital rendering. My parents were proud, my friends were celebrating with me, and for a fleeting moment, I felt like I was on top of the world. Then Chloe approached me, a glass of sparkling cider in her hand, and a familiar, faintly pitying smile on her face. "Congratulations, Layla," she said, her voice just loud enough for our nearby aunts and uncles to hear. She gestured toward my diploma. "I'm glad you had fun getting your art degree. It's good to have a hobby." She then turned to our uncle, a tax accountant, and said, "My team at North Star Analytics is about to publish a paper on predictive modeling for supply chain logistics. The math is just fascinating." The air went out of my celebration. My art degree, as she called it, had included advanced programming, calculus, and physics engines, but she had reduced it to finger painting. I didn't say anything. I just smiled tightly and walked away, the joy of the day dimming with every step. That was Chloe's signature move, the public dismissal wrapped in a thin veil of sisterly affection. Years passed, and the pattern continued, evolving as our careers did. I poured my life savings and a small loan into starting my own mobile gaming company, which I named Pixelburst. I worked out of the spare bedroom in my small apartment, fueled by cheap coffee and an unshakable belief in the worlds I was building. My first game was a simple but addictive puzzle game called Gem Weavers. It did moderately well, enough to pay my bills and hire a part-time programmer. I remember one Christmas, a few years after I'd started Pixelburst. The whole family was gathered in the living room, a fire crackling in the hearth. I was excited because I had just finished the beta version of our second title, a much more ambitious adventure game. With my heart pounding, I pulled out my tablet to show everyone. "Look, this is what I've been working on," I said, my voice trembling slightly. I showed them the main character, a brave little knight I had designed myself, navigating a lush, animated forest. My mom and dad were enthusiastic, offering words of encouragement. My grandpa, Arthur, watched with intense focus, asking intelligent questions about the user interface and the game's mechanics. Chloe, however, barely glanced up from her phone. After a moment, she sighed with theatrical impatience. "That's nice, Layla," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. "Very colorful." She then placed her phone face down on the coffee table with an air of importance. "Speaking of work, my team just landed a 7-figure contract securing the data infrastructure for a major international bank. It's a massive undertaking. The security protocols alone are a nightmare." She looked around the room, ensuring everyone understood the scale and seriousness of her work, compared to my colorful little game. Again, I was silenced. My creation, my passion, was reduced to a triviality. How could my little knight character possibly compete with the abstract, weighty concept of data infrastructure for a major international bank? It couldn't, and Chloe knew it. The final years, leading up to that fateful Thanksgiving, were the worst. Pixelburst started to gain real traction. Gem Weavers had a viral moment and our user base exploded. Our adventure game, Imberlite, won a small indie game award. I was able to move into a small office space and hire a few full-time employees. I was working harder than ever, but I was also happier than ever. I was building something real. But to Chloe, its reality was questionable. About a month before Thanksgiving, I called her, genuinely excited. We just surpassed 10 million active users. It was a huge milestone for us. I thought, perhaps naively, that a number that large might finally earn a nod of genuine respect. Chloe, you won't believe it, I said. We just hit 10 million users on Imberlite. There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. Oh, wow, she said, her voice flat. That's a lot of people, that's great. Then, without missing a beat, she pivoted. Hey, I meant to tell you, I was just promoted to senior project manager. It's a huge step up. I'm overseeing the entire Western region's data integration now. The organizational complexity is on a whole other level. And just like that, my 10 million users were forgotten, overshadowed by her new, important-sounding title. I ended the call feeling foolish and small. It was then that I truly understood. It didn't matter what I accomplished. In her eyes, I would always be the little sister playing with crayons. So, as I drove to my parents' house on Thanksgiving morning, a familiar sense of dread settled in my stomach. I knew what the day would hold. I knew Chloe would be there, armed with her new promotion and a fresh batch of condescending remarks. I had a secret of my own this year, a piece of news so monumental it felt like a physical weight in my chest. But I had no intention of sharing it. I just wanted to survive the day, eat some turkey, and go home. I had no idea that my wise old grandfather had a very different plan. The secret I was carrying was heavy, exhilarating, and utterly terrifying. 6 weeks before Thanksgiving, after months of grueling negotiations, Pixelburst had been acquired. It wasn't just any acquisition. We were bought by OmniCorp, one of the largest and most powerful tech conglomerates in the world. They were famous for identifying promising smaller companies and providing them with the resources to scale globally. The final sale price was $45 million. The number itself felt unreal. I had said it, read it, and signed documents with it, but it still didn't seem to belong to me. 45 million. It was more money than I had ever imagined seeing in my lifetime. My little company, born in a spare bedroom and fueled by instant noodles, was now a multi-million-dollar asset of a global powerhouse. The decision to keep it a secret from my family was immediate and instinctive. My parents, bless their hearts, would worry. They would be proud, of course, but they would also be overwhelmed. They came from humble backgrounds, and a sum like that would feel more like a burden to them than a blessing. They would fret about my safety, about people taking advantage of me, about me changing as a person. And then there was Chloe. The thought of telling her was exhausting. I could picture her reaction with perfect clarity. First, disbelief. Then, a forensic-style interrogation about the deal's structure, the valuation metrics, the earn-out clauses, all designed to find a flaw, to prove that it wasn't as impressive as it sounded. Finally, if she found it to be unimpeachable, the jealousy would set in. It wouldn't be happy for me. It would be a new kind of competition, a new yardstick against which she would measure her own success. My achievement would become a weapon she would perceive as being used against her. I didn't want that. I just wanted to enjoy the quiet satisfaction of my success, on my own terms. There was one person I knew I had to tell, my grandfather. Grandpa Arthur was the rock of our family. A retired electrical engineer, he possessed a quiet, deep intelligence and a curiosity that had never faded with age. He was the one who had given me my first book on coding when I was 13. He had looked at my early game designs not as silly drawings, but as nascent systems of logic and creativity. He saw the engineering in my art and the art in his engineering. I invited him out for lunch at a quiet diner a few weeks after the deal closed. As we sat in a worn vinyl booth, I slid a folder across the table. It contained the official press release from Omnicorp. He put on his reading glasses, his brow furrowed in concentration as he read. He read it once, then read it again, slowly. Finally, he took off his glasses and looked at me, his eyes wide. He didn't speak for a full minute. A slow, broad smile spread across his face, lighting up his gentle features. "Layla," he said, his voice thick with emotion. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "This is remarkable. Absolutely remarkable." He wasn't looking at me like I had won the lottery. He was looking at me like an artist admiring a masterpiece or an engineer admiring a perfectly designed bridge. He saw the work, not just the money. "I don't want to tell the family, Grandpa," I confessed, my voice barely a whisper. "Especially not Chloe." He nodded, his smile softening into one of profound understanding. "I get it," he said. "This is yours, you built it, you get to decide how and when you share it." He tapped the press release. "Omnicorp, that's a giant. Chloe's firm, North Star Analytics, isn't that one of their subsidiaries?" My blood ran cold for a second. "Yes," I said. "I looked it up. Omnicorp bought them about 3 years ago." The irony was almost too perfect. Grandpa Arthur chuckled softly, a twinkle in his eye. "Well, I'll be," he said, shaking his head. "The world is a funny, small place." He promised to keep my secret, and I knew he would. His word was ironclad. Leaving the diner that day, I felt a sense of relief. My biggest secret was safe with the one person I knew would truly understand it. Fast forward to Thanksgiving Day. I parked my modest sedan down the street from my parents' house, took a deep breath, and walked up the familiar stone pathway. The front door was already open, and the warm, delicious smells of roasting turkey and cinnamon spilled out into the crisp autumn air. For a moment, it was just home. Then I heard Chloe's voice, and the spell was broken. I walked into the living room, a store-bought pumpkin pie in my hands. My mom rushed over to hug me, her hands dusted with flour. "Layla, you made it. Happy Thanksgiving, sweetie." My dad gave me a warm pat on the back. And then I saw Chloe. She was, as expected, holding court on the sofa, a glass of wine in hand, recounting a dramatic story about a server crisis she had single-handedly averted last week. She was wearing a sharp, expensive-looking blazer, a stark contrast to my comfortable sweater and jeans. "Layla," she said, her eyes sweeping over me in a quick, dismissive appraisal. "Good of you to join us." It wasn't a warm welcome, it was an acknowledgement of my tardiness, though I was perfectly on time. "Happy Thanksgiving, Chloe," I replied, forcing a smile. The next hour was a slow, agonizing crawl toward dinner. I tried to make small talk with my cousins, asking about their kids and their jobs, but the gravitational center of the room was Chloe. The conversation always seemed to swing back to her high-stakes job, her team of subordinates, her crucial role in the vast, important world of real tech. I felt myself fading into the floral wallpaper, becoming an accessory in the room, a quiet spectator to the Chloe show. All the while, I could feel Grandpa Arthur's eyes on me from his armchair by the fire, offering silent, steady support. He knew, and that knowledge was my only comfort. My mother's voice, cheerful and insistent, finally called us to the dining room. "Dinner's ready, everyone find a seat." The table was a masterpiece, as it was every year. A massive, golden-brown turkey sat proudly in the center, surrounded by an army of side dishes: fluffy mashed potatoes, tangy cranberry sauce, savory stuffing, green bean casserole topped with crispy onions. The scent was intoxicating, a comforting blend of herbs and home. For a moment, the festive atmosphere was enough to make me forget my anxiety. I found my seat across from Chloe and next to Grandpa Arthur, hoping his presence would act as a shield. For the first part of the meal, things were surprisingly peaceful. The conversation was light and general. My dad carved the turkey with surgical precision, my uncle told a long, rambling story about his golf game, and my aunt praised my mother's cooking. I started to relax. Maybe this year would be different. Maybe Chloe had exhausted her supply of condescension in the living room. It was a foolish hope. As we were finishing our first helpings, Chloe delicately placed her fork and knife on her plate, a signal that she was about to make a proclamation. She took a sip of her wine, cleared her throat, and looked at me across the table. "So Layla," she began, her voice casual, yet carrying an undercurrent of intent. "How are the little phone games going? Still enjoying your hobby?" There it was again, the word hobby, the deliberate diminishment of my life's work. I felt a familiar heat rise in my cheeks. Grandpa Arthur shifted slightly in his chair beside me. I forced a polite, tight-lipped smile. "They're going well, thanks," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "We've been very busy." "Busy," she repeated, feigning interest. "That's good. It's important to stay busy. Are you still working out of that little office, the one by the train tracks?" "We upgraded to a larger space downtown about 6 months ago, actually," I replied, my voice a little tighter than I intended. "Oh, downtown, how fun," she said. Her tone suggesting it was a quaint and charmingly amateur move. "I'm glad you're finding some success with it. I know how much it means to you." Every word was a carefully placed needle. Finding some success. How much it means to you. It was the kind of language you use to praise a child's lemonade stand. My parents exchanged a quick, nervous glance, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. My mother, ever the peacekeeper, quickly interjected. "Layla, your father and I played that imberlite game of yours the other night," she said brightly. "We couldn't get past that tricky part with the rolling boulders. It's very clever." I gave her a grateful look. "Thanks, Mom, you just have to time it right." But Chloe was not to be deterred. She saw the conversation being steered away from her target and immediately wrestled it back. "That reminds me, I have some exciting news," she announced to the table at large, though her eyes remained fixed on me. "I mentioned my promotion earlier, but I don't think I explained the full scope of it. As senior project manager, I'm now responsible for leading a team of 52 people across 3 states." She paused, letting the number hang in the air. 52, she repeated for emphasis. "It's an immense responsibility. We're handling multi-terabyte data migrations for our enterprise clients. It's not just about managing people, it's about managing catastrophic risk. One wrong line of code, one miscalculation in server allocation, and a company could lose millions. It's incredibly high stakes." She leaned back in her chair, a look of serene self-satisfaction on her face. The message was clear. I manage 52 people and prevent catastrophic financial meltdowns. You make games with rolling boulders. I just stared down at my plate, pushing a piece of turkey around with my fork. My appetite was gone. The delicious food tasted like ash in my mouth. I felt the weight of every gaze at the table. Some were sympathetic, like my mother S. Others were impressed by Chloe's speech. But all I could feel was the profound, suffocating injustice of it all. I had built a company from nothing. I had hired a team, managed payroll, navigated legal hurdles, designed, coded, marketed, and successfully sold a product loved by millions of people. My work was also high stakes. My decisions affected the livelihoods of my employees and the happiness of my user base. But because it was a game, because it was creative and fun, it was deemed less worthy. I felt Grandpa Arthur's hand gently touch my arm under the table. It was a small, almost imperceptible gesture, but it was enough. It was a silent message. "I see you. I know the truth, be patient." I took a shaky breath and looked up, meeting his gaze for a split second. He gave me the slightest of nods. The storm was gathering, and I had a feeling the lightning was about to strike. The brief moment of comfort from my grandfather was shattered when my Aunt Carol, a sweet woman who was blissfully unaware of the undercurrents of sibling warfare, turned to me with genuine warmth. "Layla, honey, that's just wonderful that your business is growing," she said, smiling. "You must be so proud. What is it you're planning on doing next? Another game?" It was an innocent question, a simple expression of interest. But to Chloe, it was a perfectly served volleyball, and she was already in the air, ready to spike it. She let out a short, sharp laugh, a sound that was more of a scoff. It cut through the low hum of conversation and made everyone at the table fall silent. "Oh, Carol," Chloe said, shaking her head as if explaining a complex concept to a child. Layla's work is different. She turned her full attention to me, her eyes glinting with a smug superiority that made my stomach clench. She was enjoying this, savoring the moment. This was her arena, and she was the undefeated champion of belittling her little sister. "It's cute that you make games, Layla," she said, her voice laced with a thick, syrupy condescension that was far more insulting than outright anger. She leaned forward, placing her elbows on the table, a posture of casual dominance. "But some of us have to work in real tech." She paused, looking around the table to make sure she had everyone's rapt attention. She did. The room was deathly quiet. Even the clinking of cutlery had stopped. "It requires real brains, you know." The words landed like stones in the silent room. Real tech, real brains. The implication was brutally clear. My work was fake, and my intelligence was inferior. It wasn't just an insult to my career. It was an insult to my very being, delivered on a platter for my entire family to witness. Time seemed to slow down. I could feel the blood rushing to my face, a hot, prickling wave of humiliation. I saw the shock on my Aunt Carol's face, her kind question having unwittingly triggered this public execution. I saw my father's jaw tighten, his knuckles white his water glass. I saw my mother's eyes, wide with a mixture of horror and helpless pity. She looked like she wanted to say something, to leap to my defense, but she was frozen, caught in the headlights of her older daughter's cruelty. And I saw Chloe. She was leaning back in her chair now, a triumphant little smirk playing on her lips. She had done it. She had finally said the quiet part out loud, stripping away all pretense of sisterly support and laying her contempt bare for all to see. She was daring me to respond, to defend my cute little job and my not-quite-real brain. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. What could I even say? If I argued, I would sound defensive and petty. If I cried, I would give her the satisfaction of having broken me. If I stayed silent, I would be admitting defeat. In that moment, I felt utterly and completely trapped. The weight of years of these small cuts and subtle jabs coalesced into a single, crushing point of pain. I felt small, foolish, and powerless. I dropped my gaze back to my plate, focusing on the intricate patterns of the china, trying to anchor myself to something solid as the world tilted around me. The silence stretched on, thick and suffocating. It was the most uncomfortable family dinner of my life, and in my family, that was saying something. I wanted to disappear, to rewind time, to be anywhere but at that table, under the scalpel of my sister's judgment. The smirk on Chloe's face grew wider. She had won. The room was hers. She picked up her wine glass, ready to take a victory sip. But before the glass could reach her lips, another sound broke the silence. It was the gentle, deliberate sound of a fork being placed on a plate. Every head at the table turned. It was Grandpa Arthur. He sat at the head of the table, his posture as straight and steady as always. He calmly wiped his mouth with his napkin, folded it deliberately, and placed it beside his plate. The small, methodical actions seemed to command the room's entire attention. In the tense silence, they were as loud as a gavel strike. He looked down the length of the table, his gaze sweeping past my stunned parents and my mortified aunt, before finally settling on Chloe. His expression wasn't angry or accusatory. It was one of calm, academic curiosity, the same look he'd get just before solving a particularly tricky crossword puzzle. "You work for North Star Analytics, don't you, Chloe?" he asked. His voice was perfectly level, conversational, yet it sliced through the thick tension like a knife. Chloe was momentarily thrown off balance. She lowered her wine glass, her victorious smirk faltering into a look of confusion. "Yes, Grandpa, you know I do," she said, a hint of impatience in her tone. "I've been there for 8 years." Right, Grandpa Arthur said, nodding slowly. "North Star Analytics, a very impressive firm. I hear they do very important work with data." He paused, letting his words hang in the air for a moment, validating her career in a way she'd never validated mine. He was baiting the hook. Chloe preened, her confidence returning. "We do. It's one of the leading firms in the enterprise solutions space, she said proudly. Grandpa Arthur leaned forward slightly, his eyes still locked on hers. He kept his voice soft, yet it carried to every corner of the silent room. Is that why her company bought yours for $45 million? The question detonated in the center of the table. For a full 3 seconds there was nothing. No sound, no movement. It was as if the world had stopped spinning. I saw my uncle, who had been taking a sip of water, freeze mid-swallow and then begin to choke quietly. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes impossibly wide. My father simply stared, his fork hovering halfway to his plate, his expression a perfect mask of disbelief. And Chloe's reaction was a slow-motion collapse. The color drained from her face, leaving her skin a pale, waxy yellow. Her smug confidence didn't just disappear, it shattered, leaving behind a gaping void of pure shock. Her mouth opened and closed silently, like a fish gasping for air. "What?" she finally managed to stammer, her voice a reedy, unfamiliar squeak. What are you talking about?" Grandpa Arthur didn't look at me. He kept his focus entirely on Chloe, forcing her to confront the reality of the situation head-on. "Layla's company, Pixelburst," he explained in that same, unnervingly calm voice, "was acquired by the OmniCorp conglomerate last month. I believe the deal closed on October 12th. He recited the date with the precision of an engineer stating a fact. OmniCorp, as you know, is the parent company of North Star Analytics. They've owned your firm for a few years now. I read the press release online. A very impressive achievement, Layla." Only then did he turn his head and look at me. He gave me a slow, deliberate wink, a secret signal that passed between us across battlefield of the dining room. The dam of silence broke. 45 million, my dad whispered, his voice hoarse with awe, looking at me as if for the first time. "Layla, is that true?" my mom asked, her eyes filling with tears of what I hoped was pride. But I couldn't look at them. I couldn't look at anyone but Chloe. Her face was a chaotic storm of emotions. Disbelief warred with comprehension. Humiliation battled with dawning horror. She was processing it all at once. The money, the acquisition, the fact that her serious company was owned by the same entity that had just purchased her little sister's cute game studio. The corporate hierarchy was clear. In the world of OmniCorp, my little Pixelburst was the shiny new acquisition, the multi-million-dollar bet on the future. Her North Star Analytics was just another established asset on the balance sheet. In a way he hadn't intended, Grandpa's phrasing had been devastatingly accurate. My company had, in essence, bought hers. The room, which moments ago had been her stage, was now her pillory. The brains she had boasted about had failed to note the single most significant event happening within her own parent company. The real tech she championed had been outmaneuvered and overshadowed by the very person she had spent a lifetime looking down on. The silence that followed wasn't just quiet. It was a profound, echoing void, filled with the wreckage of a 20-year-old superiority complex. Chloe just sat there, frozen, her face pale, the mocking words she had spoken just minutes earlier hanging in the air like a ghost to haunt her. The rest of the dinner was a wreck. The festive atmosphere had completely evaporated, replaced by a thick, awkward tension. No one knew what to say. My aunts and uncles kept shooting me quick, astonished glances, their faces a mixture of awe and confusion. My father tried to ask a question about the acquisition, but his voice trailed off as he saw the look on Chloe's face. My mother, bless her heart, attempted to restore normalcy by asking if anyone wanted more mashed potatoes, but her voice was shaky, and there were no takers. The magnificent feast sat largely untouched. Chloe remained silent, a statue of humiliation at the center of the chaos. She didn't eat. She didn't speak. She just stared at her plate, her knuckles white where she gripped her fork. The victorious queen of the dinner table had been dethroned in a single, perfectly executed sentence. I couldn't stand it anymore. Pushing my chair back, I murmured, "Excuse me, I need some air." I fled the dining room, walking through the kitchen and out the back door into the chilly November night. The cold air was a relief, stinging my hot cheeks. I wrapped my arms around myself and stared up at the starless, overcast sky, my breath fogging in front of me. A few moments later, the back door creaked open and shut. I didn't have to turn around to know it was Chloe. She didn't speak for a long time. I could feel her presence behind me, a vortex of anger and shame. When she finally spoke, her voice was low and trembling with a rage she was struggling to control. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. It wasn't a question born of curiosity, it was an accusation. I turned to face her. In the dim light from the kitchen window, I could see her face was blotchy and her eyes were red. "Why would I have, Chloe?" I asked, my own voice surprisingly steady. The fear and intimidation I had felt for her my entire life had vanished, burned away by the events of the last 10 minutes. "Because you're my sister," she shot back, her voice cracking. "Because this is huge. You don't just keep something like this a secret from your family." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "Don't I? For years, my company has been a joke to you, a hobby. My work was real tech. My brain was real enough for you. Why on earth would I share the biggest moment of my professional life with someone who has never, not once, shown me an ounce of genuine respect?" "That's not true," she said, but her defense was weak, lacking any conviction. "Isn't it?" I challenged, stepping closer. "Tell me, Chloe, what did you say to me at my college graduation? Do you remember? You called my degree a hobby. What did you say last Christmas when I showed you my new game? You called it colorful and immediately started talking about your bank contract. What did you say 10 minutes ago in front of our entire family? You called my life's work cute and questioned my intelligence. You don't get to spend years tearing me down and then demand to be included in my victory parade." Tears welled in her eyes, tears of frustration and fury, not remorse. "So, what, this was all some kind of game to you? You and Grandpa cooked this up. You deliberately set me up to make me look like a fool." "No," I said firmly, shaking my head. "The truth was, Grandpa's timing was a surprise even to me. You made yourself look like a fool, Chloe. I kept it a secret because I didn't want this. I didn't want the money to become the only thing people saw. I didn't want it to become a competition. But for you, it has always been a competition. A competition you were so sure you were winning that you never even bothered to look at who you were running against." She flinched as if I had slapped her. The truth of my words hit her with undeniable force. She had been so consumed by her own narrative of superiority that she had become completely blind. She had no response. There was nothing she could say to defend herself. We stood there in the cold, the silence stretching between us, thicker and more final than ever before. The dynamic between us, a structure that had been in place for over 3 decades, had crumbled to dust in less than an hour. She wasn't my intimidating older sister anymore. She was just a woman who had been publicly humbled by her own arrogance. I looked at her, and for the first time I didn't feel anger or resentment. I just felt a profound sense of sadness. Sadness for the sisterhood we could have had, the support we could have offered each other. That future was impossible now, and she was the one who had made it so. "I'm going home," I said quietly, and walked past her, back into the warmth of the house. I said a quick, hushed goodbye to my shocked parents and my proud grandfather, grabbed my coat, and left without a second glance at the wreckage of our family dinner. The drive home was quiet, but my mind was loud with the sound of breaking chains. The days and weeks following that Thanksgiving were strange and quiet. It was like the aftermath of a storm, where everyone is tiptoeing around the fallen trees, unsure of how to begin cleaning up. My phone, which had been silent on the drive home, began to light up with calls and texts from my parents, aunts, and cousins, all expressing a clumsy mixture of congratulations and shock. They were looking at me differently now. I wasn't just creative Layla anymore. I was Layla, the $45 million tech mogul. The respect was nice, but the awe felt alienating. Chloe didn't call. Not for 3 days. When she finally did, the conversation was excruciatingly awkward. "Hi," she said, her voice small and strained. "Hi, Chloe," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. There was a long, painful pause. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. Finally, she choked out the words, "I'm sorry." It sounded like the words were being physically pulled from her. For what I said at dinner. It was an apology, but it felt incomplete. She was sorry for the final, public insult, the one that had backfired so spectacularly. Was she sorry for the years of private condescension, for the dismissive comments at graduations and Christmases? I doubted it, but it was a start. "Thank you," I said simply. "I appreciate that." I had no idea," she added, her voice still a whisper, "about the acquisition." "I know," I said, "that was the point." The conversation didn't last much longer. We exchanged a few more stilted pleasantries and hung up. There was no grand reconciliation, no tearful reunion. The chasm between us was too wide and too deep to be bridged by a single, grudging apology. Our relationship has changed, but it hasn't necessarily healed. It's built on a new foundation now, not of love or mutual respect, but of a grudging deference from her side. When we talk, she asks about my work with a forced, almost clinical interest. She no longer makes dismissive comments. Instead, she's cautious, wary, as if she's afraid of stepping on a landmine she can't see. The condescension is gone, but so is any semblance of sisterly warmth. It's a colder relationship, but in many ways, it's more peaceful. The constant pressure of her judgment has been lifted. The biggest change has been within myself. For years, I had carried the weight of Chloe's opinion like a heavy cloak. I had subconsciously allowed her definition of success to shape my own feelings of self-worth. No matter what I accomplished, a small part of me always heard her voice whispering that it wasn't good enough, wasn't real enough. That Thanksgiving, Grandpa Arthur didn't just expose a secret, he liberated me. He didn't do it for revenge. He did it to restore balance, to defend my honor in a way I hadn't been able to do for myself. The moment the truth came out, the cloak of her judgment dissolved. My success was finally, undeniably mine. It wasn't up for debate or interpretation. It was a fact, printed in a press release and valued in dollars and cents. A language that, ironically, was the only one Chloe seemed to truly understand. I'm still the CEO of Pixelburst, which now operates as an independent studio under the OmniCorp umbrella. I have more resources, a bigger team, and the freedom to pursue even more ambitious creative projects. I love my work. I love the worlds we build and the joy they bring to millions of people. And now, I can finally enjoy that success without a shadow of doubt or apology. I don't know if Chloe and I will ever be close. Perhaps in time, the memory of that night will fade, and we'll find a new, more authentic way to be sisters, or perhaps we won't. But I've come to accept that. My worth is not tied to her approval. My real brains built a company from the ground up, and my cute games created a legacy. And that is a truth I can finally own, completely and without reservation. For anyone out there dealing with a similar situation, whether it's with a family member, a friend, or a colleague who constantly belittles your passion, know this: their opinion is a reflection of their own insecurities, not your value. Keep building, keep creating, keep pursuing what you love with everything you have. The most profound vindication comes not from proving them wrong, but from proving yourself right. Let your success be its own undeniable truth.